Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. That's SelectQuote.com.
SelectQuote. We shop. You save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Join us as we seek the truth and travel the long road to justice.
What you know, Alibiers? GiGi here. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. Got to give a big thank you. I got to pull the name back up. I forgot to. But one of our listeners or watchers on YouTube last night had a perfect idea. So instead of saying Fruit Loop, what you know, I'm going to say, what you know, Alibiers. And I think that was a really awesome idea. I'll shout you out tomorrow when I get your name. First, before we get started, really just on behalf of both Fruit Loop and I want to say thank you so much for all of the amazing inboxes, comments left, emails, everything that was so encouraging to us. It really made yesterday a lot easier for the both of us, I think, to know that you guys support where we're at, and just can't say thank you enough. I want to give a big thank you to Shirley for the donation. Really appreciate that. And it's really funny because today my daughter had the other side of her nose cauterized, so she went under anesthesia real quick, and I'm driving her home. And the song Closing Time by Semisonic, you guys may know this, an old one. And if you've listened long enough, you know music is my jam. I got a Pink Floyd shirt on right now. But there's a line in that song that really just blew me away today. And I needed to hear it. And it says, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And I really just kind of thought that was a sign that everything's going to be cool. Everything's going to be okay. Appreciate you guys sticking with me. It's going to be business as usual. It's going to take me a little while to figure out some little things. I got somebody working on a really cool overlay for YouTube where it's interactive and I can show things at the same time I'm on air doing the podcast. And then in the beginning, I think on the days where we have a little bit of news that doesn't really fit into a whole episode, I'm going to throw that in at the very beginning. So for today, Barry Morphew was on Zoom back in court, pled guilty to a forgery charge for voting in the presidential election on behalf of his wife, Suzanne, who was missing and probably, unfortunately, dead at the time. And he got a deferred, guys, he's like Teflon Don. I'm telling you, this guy's, he got a deferred sentence to 1 year of supervised probation, no jail time. And he has to perform 32 hours of community service, and he can do it in Denver if he wants, not just in Chaffee County. So that's kind of the little tidbit. Also, some Caitlin Armstrong documents that I have not had a chance to look through yet, but it looks like maybe she was, I'm going to look here, shot, Mo Wilson was shot twice in the head and once in the chest when she was on the floor. I haven't gone through all those documents yet. So maybe tomorrow we'll go through those. So we're going to pick back up on the Vallow Daybell mega series. And so we left off at the very last body cam footage that showed Charles just pleading for these cops to get Lori help. So Melanie Gibb talked to investigators on October 19th of 2020 about Charles's truck. And she said Charles left it there at the airport and then Alex came and took it. So Gibb texts Lori's phone to check in on her, and the response says, hey, come over to the house and bring the truck, and asks about the keys. So when Gibb gets over there, there's locksmiths over there working on the door from where the police had kicked it in the night before. And she realizes it was Charles who had responded and not Lori. And she said they say hello, and Gibb asks if Lori's home, and Charles says no. He says he needs to talk to her, and she said it was uncomfortable, but looking back now, her heart breaks for Charles, and I'm sure that is something she will have to resolve in her mind because, the whole group was part of all this. Ned Schneider. I see him like Charles now. I don't even know which one it is. But he tells Gibb he's so worried about Lori. She's lost her mind, thinks she's a translated being, married to Moroni. She thinks I'm some guy named Ted. And so she said she gave him a hug and told him goodbye and left. And then she calls Chad and asks where Lori is. And she said Chad acted dumb since Gibb really wasn't supposed to know that they were a thing. And she gets a call from a strange number and picks it up, and is Lori. So she had gotten a new phone and says Charles had stolen her purse, which we know from last night's episode, he had her phone. And so Gibb sees Jason Mao parked at a nearby park, and she stops to tell him about Charles taking Lori's purse. And he tells her they should go to the police, and Lori agreed. So the investigator, this is still back in 2020, asked Gibb if she told Jason about Charles's truck, and she says she can't remember. So the investigator very sneakily says, well, I asked because we've talked to him too, which means essentially Jason Mao said, yes, you did talk about the truck. And then Gibb says, I guess. So Gibb said before they went to the police station about the stolen purse, she followed Lori as she drove the truck to another location near some temple off the highway there in Arizona. And so Charles calls 911 twice while Lori is in the middle of filing the complaint about him taking her purse. Remember, she has this order for a 72-hour involuntary commitment at Community Bridges for a psychiatric evaluation. Charles wants the police there at the station to know about this pickup order and get her while she's there. So the first call was at 1:12 p.m. We're still on the 31st, I believe. So he calls 911 and says, my name is Charles Vallow. I've got an order to hold my wife. You can look it up, Lori Vallow. And dispatch says, yeah, we spoke to you earlier about her. Charles says she's at the Gilbert PD saying I stole her purse. I'm going to go over there. And the officer said he won't hold her because he doesn't have an active order. Could you get that to him like immediately? I'm going there right now. And the dispatch says, one moment. Charles says, thank you. The dispatch asks, is Lori in the lobby right now? And Charles says, that's correct. Blonde hair. Dispatch asks Charles, how far away are you? And he says, I'm about 10 minutes away. So the dispatch asks, do you want officers to go down there with her? And Charles says that Lori is supposed to be detained for Community Bridges. He said, I got an order last night. She's lost her marbles. Dispatch says, okay, we can get in contact with our front office. And Charles says, I don't want to go there if she's not going to be detained. And dispatch interrupts and says that they're going to make the call right now. So Charles asks, can you call me back and let me know? And the dispatch says that they could have an officer call back. Charles says, thank you. And then so that call was sent out at 1:12, and at 1:20, he makes a second call to 911. He says, this is Charles Vallow. I called a minute ago saying my wife is at the Gilbert Police Department saying I stole her purse, but they've called for her to be held at Community Bridges. She's supposed to when they can find her, and she's there. They said somebody would call me back in a minute, and I just want to make sure that's going to happen. I've been trying to find her all day. She needs serious help. Dispatch asks his name and Lori's name, and he tells her. And Charles says she's making a complaint against me at the police department right there. Then Charles clarifies with the dispatch. You can tell he's needing directions to Gilbert PD. And then he asks, do you know if they're going to do the hold on her for Community Bridges? And dispatch says, did you just call in, Charles? And Charles says, I did, yeah. And dispatch says, okay, it's only been less than 10 minutes. And Charles says, they will call me back. Dispatch says, yes. Charles says, thank you. And dispatch says, is your wife Lori still here that you know of? And Charles says, yes, she's waiting on me to bring her purse. So dispatch says, yeah, they're going to get an officer assigned here as soon as they can, and an officer will be contacting you. And Charles says, okay. So and we're kind of going back in time. I wanted to do these 911 calls because I didn't want to stop in the middle of this police visit. So actually, Lori, Tylee, and Gibb go to the Gilbert PD at 12:36 p.m. And Lori goes to the police station to file a statement about the theft. She wanted documentation of the alleged theft, but no charges filed. And, I was thinking, why would she not want charges filed at this point? It would be an easy way to really screw Charles over. But I think, she had a lot she had to make sure of, which is the finances. She did, we know that she went back to Texas eventually, way later, to essentially make sure that the life insurance policy was still in her name. I just think that she didn't want to charge him because that might have been the end of the rope for Charles. And at this point, he's still trying to help her. Just totally an opinion. But, during this time, I noticed that Tylee seemed nervous. She was constantly moving her hands. And she went to file a report on Charles for taking the purse. And Lori says her friend, who is a police officer, Jason Mao, told her to file a police report. She says, so yesterday, I was arguing with my husband on the phone. He was in Texas working, and I found some stuff that he had been doing. So he was really defensive. So I took the kids and spent the night in a hotel because I knew he was coming home. This morning, when I took my son to school, I went into the school to take him. He was waiting somewhere and stole my purse out of the car, my phone, my wallet, my money, everything. I wish Charles would have taken that debit card and got that $35,000 back out. Bless his heart. But she said she had the door locked, but the sunroof was open because JJ's service dog was still inside the car. And she said JJ was throwing a fit because he didn't have his stuff since they slept at a hotel, and she didn't want to have to get him and the dog out. So she says she did not have the door locked for the first time, but she just said she had the door locked. But anyways, and she says she didn't have the door locked for the first time ever. And she says she doesn't remember if the door was locked or if he reached through the sunroof and got it out. Then he started texting all my family and friends impersonating me and got my friend lured over to the house to meet, where he had kicked in the door to get in the house, which I'm glad we weren't there. And Melanie Gibb says when she got there, she was like, Lori? And she said he texted my phone. Lori said he texted her pretending to be Gibb to get her at the house. So Gibb said that Charles asked if she could come in the house. And she said she told Charles, you've been using Lori's phone to connect with me. And Charles apologizes and says, I've deceived you. And Melanie said, yes, you did. She said there were other people there, someone in a white Suburban, and she assumed it was Lori, but she didn't see Lori's car there. And Gibb said Charles asked her what's gotten into Lori, where is she? And Melanie Gibb said, of course, I didn't say where she was. I didn't know where she was. And so Lori said she didn't tell anyone where she was because she thought it was safer. Melanie said she thinks Charles wanted her to take his side. And yeah, because if she's saying her vibrations are so high that she can portal somewhere, yeah, you should be taking Charles's side. So Lori says he changed the locks and was telling Gibb how crazy she was and stuff like that. The officer asks if stuff like this is common, and Lori says yes, they've had to go to hotels in the past until he calms down. And the officer asks what motivates these situations, and Lori says he just goes nuts sometimes. And she goes that this time she caught him cheating and she has evidence and told him about it. And she said he travels out of town a lot for business. So she found out and told him not to come home. Her voice gets really forceful. And she's like, his stuff will be gone. His car will be gone. And you see Tylee literally just put her hand over and kind of like touch her mom, like calm down. And I remember back in the early days when this footage came out, Fruit Loop and I were very much at odds about the kids. And Fruit Loop said, they work in tandem. You see how she's calming her mom. They're close. I don't think they're dead. And then, we kind of flip-flop, but that was one thing that we did notice is several times Tylee reaches her hand over and it's just like, calm down. Gosh, she said she left with the kids because she didn't want them in all the drama. And the cop says he took your phone and your purse. Has he tried to contact you? And Lori said, yes, he has. And through Gibb. And Tylee shakes her head yes as well. Lori says that she personally has no way to be contacted. He has her phone. And she said she went to buy a throwaway phone so she could just have one, which is kind of weird. Tylee has a phone and she's with her all day, but whatever. When asked if Charles tried to give her stuff back, Lori says he talked to Gibb and Gibb asked Charles if he would be willing to give her the purse for Lori. In other words, give Melanie Gibb the purse to give to Lori. And Charles said, no, not unless she does this and this and this. And Gibb didn't specify what this meant. The officer said, I need specifics. So Lori said to meet at therapy, I assume like an after school therapy for JJ, and he would give it to her. Lori says she doesn't want to talk to him today if she doesn't have to. And the cop says, if we have him bring the purse back, are we all good? And Lori responds, I don't want to meet with him in person. He's very sneaky. What he'll do is meet me in the parking lot and mess around with me. The officer asked, what if they facilitate the exchange there at the police station? And Lori says that would be fine. So, she's already putting in this cop's head that Charles is the bad guy because she's the one sitting there with two other people first. So the cop asked Tylee what Charles texted her the night before, and she said he basically texted me. And at this point, Lori interrupts and says he was texting JJ was in danger, and Tylee puts her hand out again and shushes her. So Tylee says at first he texts me, are you doing okay today? And it's redacted in parts. And he says, tell your mom I may not be home for a bit. Love you. Then he sent a strange link to a website about their church. And then he texted me at almost midnight saying, I'm sorry. And it's redacted. Something about danger. I have no choice. And he was acting like he did something. And I think really maybe he was apologizing to Tylee for the community bridges pickup order because that still hadn't been done. And, that's all I can guess. But she said he didn't file a police report as far as they know. So they were just assuming he was just trying to get a response. And he told Tylee he loved her. And he said he was sending word for word the same text to her cousin, which I assume maybe is Zach, who lived with them. And Lori said, my friend who's a police officer said, go file a report, file a restraining order, all this stuff. And she said, I didn't want to do all that. I just wanted to get my purse back. That would be lovely. And Lori says, I'm really mad about my lip gloss. And the cop giggles. And she says he has all my cards. She said, I took all the money out of our account, but it's a joint account. So he wants me to give him money. And the cop said, all of that's a civil issue. First, there's no reason he's walking around with your purse, your ID that he doesn't have a right to. And Lori says all the rest of the stuff is ours together, jointly meaning the money. Like, I want my purse back, but he can't have his money back that he needs for payroll in a couple of days. Typical Lori. So he calls Charles and says, you realize the purse doesn't belong to you and the money is a civil issue. In other words, you got to go to a magistrate for something like that. And the cop says, you also texted a friend to meet you under the guise you were Lori. What was that all about? And Charles said that was this morning. And then you can't hear what he's saying in his response. So they've read the report from last night about him being locked out of the house. And Charles mentions the community bridges pickup order. And the cop says he does not have the order in front of him and therefore he cannot enforce it and take her. The sergeant would have to call to verify the order is good and then they get dispatched. The officer says he can't keep someone against their will. And he says, you come in and bring her purse. The sergeant calls the doctor. He says, we don't have that. And for all we know, it's not valid anymore, talking about that pickup order. He said, I'm not discussing that. It's a separate issue. I'm discussing getting her belongings back. Okay, so you're saying it's at the house, which you changed the locks to, which she doesn't have access to. It's just poor Lori. This cop is poor Lori. Unless you want to be charged with theft, we need to get that purse back to her. So if you want to come here with the purse and the order, we can try to get it all figured out. Charles agrees to come, and the cop asks how soon he can be there. And the cop said he's coming with the purse and the order. And one cop said this should get interesting. And the other cop says real interesting. So they're out in the hallway at this point. They go back in the room and it's redacted for a minute, but clearly the officer mentions the pickup order for Lori. And he says until his sergeant verifies it's valid, he has no intention of holding her against her will. But if it's verified by the sergeant, which could take a little while, if it's verified, I have to take you to Community Bridges. It's a mental health behavior place. But while it's being verified, I have no right to keep you and hold you. So he is just telling her without telling her, you can leave now. Or, after you get your purse, you can go and there's nothing we can do. So while the cop says, while the order is being verified, you do what you feel you need to do. And Lori softly says, okay. So the officer says, how we're going to get that to go away, I don't know. Okay, so how we're going to get that to go away, I don't know. This cop is taking her word for it and clearly hasn't seen the report, but get that to go away. It's crazy. You can probably contact Community Bridges. This is committal paperwork. They can hold you 24, 48 hours, however long they deem it necessary to get you evaluated based just off of what your husband says. And Lori says, I just think it's funny because, and then Tylee puts her arm out and Lori shuts up. And then Lori says, because I'm the one who did something wrong. And she was being very sarcastic in her tone. So the officer says, I don't know. I'm not going to take sides, but just talking to you, I don't see you being a danger to yourself or anyone. You got your kids to school, but I'm letting you know if you're here and we get the order, I will have to take you with force if necessary, if you're here and it's approved. And he goes on to say, I don't know how he got it. And Lori says, that's what I don't get. He got that in the middle of the night. Wasn't it closed? And Lori says, so they'll be looking for me. And the officer says they don't bust down doors, but they will knock. So the officer says, so if you see officers knocking, talk to them through the door if you really don't want to go. So if you need a free medical or psychological evaluation, and Lori interrupts and she says, oh, I was about to say, I haven't had any sleep in 3 days. And she's trying to be funny. Do they have a good facilities? And they laugh. And the cop says, they do from what I understand. And Lori says, do they have a gym where I can work out? So you see how this interview went. Charles is the bad guy and she is just on, everything's against her. So Lori turns to Tylee and says, you'll be okay without your mama. And Tylee says, you're going to get a padded room. And everybody laughs. It's just insane, y'all. Lori asks, how can you get a mental order? And the officer says, it depends on what Charles told them. And usually they'll grant that just to be safe. And Tylee asked, do you know what he said? And the officer said no. So a cop said he needed to step out. And the other asks if he should come. And he says, no, you can stay in here and entertain them. And Tylee was joking around and said, do you know any knock-knock jokes? So Lori said that Tylee's a high school graduate at 16 and says she's applying to the academy, talking about the police academy. So she's laying it on thick here. I mean, I don't think Tylee nobody's ever said she wanted to be a police officer. Lori says she got her GED and is moving on with life. And the officer says, do you want to be a police officer? And Tylee says, maybe, you'll never know. And the cop says you can look forward to this stuff, talking about these domestic issues. The officer says he's new out of the academy, and this is more of a unique call that he's seen so far. He said he steals your phone, and now there's a petition. And Lori says something about him saying, I'm sorry I had to do it. I was worried about JJ. And Lori said it was 6 hours, and JJ was at school. And Tylee said Charles had been out of town. So they're trying to say they don't understand why Charles would say JJ's in danger. And Melanie said she was leaving the house after Charles conned her to come over. And says, I see our good friend, a police officer, Jason Mao, just pulled over beside me. And I thought to myself, I tell him what's going on. And he says, go to the police right now. Lori said she was going to come herself after he took the purse, but he's obviously lurking around here. And she said, that's creepy by itself. And Tylee said, your keys are normally in your purse, but Lori said she carried them in her hand. And again says, JJ was throwing a fit on the ground, so it was a rough morning. The cop asks whose white car Charles was driving, and Gibb and Lori both say he doesn't have any friends. Lori said he changed the locks on her, and she also is on the lease. And she said he's trying to lock me out because and she says, whatever. Gibb says she's so glad those other guys were there just so she wasn't alone with Charles. And Lori said, you were just trying to be a good friend to me. And she says he has access to all her contacts, and she's calling and telling all her friends how crazy she is. And I think she's probably super worried if she's got Chad in that phone that Charles is going to see it, or maybe see some of these stupid emails of people being possessed and dark and light and all that hogwash. So the cop asks if this is a recent thing, and Tylee said it's been 24 hours. Lori said not to this extreme, but he has been a ballistic enough to where they've had to leave, and she didn't want him to hurt one of the kids or something, which goes against everything we've ever heard about Charles Vallow, the Disneyland dad. So Tylee says 3 to 4 times she can remember as far as Charles going ballistic. And look, you live a lot of years with somebody, you're going to have a few blow-ups. That's human. A phone rings and the cops ask if it's Tylee's, and Lori said it's actually her mom's old broken phone. Lori says they're going to have to add Jason and Thor and all their friends into the contact list. So the cop asks Tylee names and mentions the different last name, and Tylee said Charles is her stepdad, and Lori says since she was 3. So the cop saw Tylee Ryan, Lori Vallow daughter. So they were just making that clear. And the cop says it takes a while to verify the order. And Lori asks if Charles is there and if there's a separate exit they can use to not see him. And the cop says that they would facilitate that. So Tylee asks about her mom potentially being gone to Community Bridges, if Charles can pick JJ up from school, or if she can and take him back to the hotel. And the cop says that Tylee can, whatever they work out amongst themselves. And the cop asks if she's worried about going back to the house. And she says now, since he's changed all the locks. And the cop says, so all this stems from him cheating and you finding out about it. And Lori shakes her head yes, and asked if she had proof. And she said yes. Now, Gibb told investigators in October of 2021 about this visit. Lori told her she knew how to handle the police. And Gibb said when the officer asked if Lori had proof of Charles having an affair, since she was telling the officer that this was the base of the whole issue, Lori said yes. Gibb later asked Lori if she really had proof. Lori said no. Liar. Liabetes. When asked why she lied about that, Gibb said to her she thought he was Ned Schneider, but nobody would believe her. So she painted a picture of him to police to make him look bad. And the cop asked Tylee plans since she got her GED. She says she may start community college and eventually transfer to a university. And Lori says she's working right now. And Tylee says yes. And they redact out where she says she works. And the cop says, as long as you're good talking to people, that's part of the job. So the cop asks about Jason, Mao, and Gibb tells the story of him getting hurt with his hamstring being pulled off the bone. And that's why he had to stop being a cop. And it took him 3 years to walk again, but the police say it was a pre-existing condition. And it took him 2 years, or they say he has a business to help fellow injured police officers. So the officer leaves and calls the bishop. Remember, Charles was on the phone with the bishop, had him tied into that call with Lori, and he heard some things. He was there at the house when the cops kicked down the door with Charles. And the cop says he's listed as a witness of an involuntary commitment, and he wanted to know what happens. And he said it's a tough situation, but Lori had been getting into some religious stuff that bothered him, and their relationship had been a bit odd for a few months. And it all came to a head when Charles went out of town. So Charles had him listen to that conversation with Lori that was kind of strange, but nothing threatening or terrorist of any kind. She did say she would get rid of his stuff. And when he came back, she canceled his flight and his truck was gone. The house was locked up. He said third parties have told him she's okay. The kids are okay. They're staying at a hotel. And the bishop says he hasn't talked to Charles in just a bit. We're almost done with this, guys. She didn't threaten him or the kids. She did say, I will destroy you. And it didn't come across as a direct threat to the bishop, Charles, or the kids, or to Lori. And you remember the other police officer said it was subjective, what she said. And the bishop said she seemed coherent, but her statements were irrational. and she was accusing him of something but wouldn't say what it was. And she indicated he was not Charles. The bishop said what concerned me was he said, I just want the kids. And she said, I'll give them to you. She sounded lucid as she was speaking. So the last bit, the investigator said in his time with her, Lori was in a normal state of mind, but slightly upset she didn't have her property, especially that lip gloss. And she showed no signs of mental distress and was in a good mood. They verified the petition and encouraged her to talk to the employees at Community Bridges and offered a ride for her to go there. They discussed with Lori the petition, and Lori was still confused how Charles could make stuff up and get her involuntarily committed. The officer told her the petition did exist and encouraged her to take care of it. And if she didn't, he would have to take her without her consent. So Lori said, I'll go on my own. And Tylee promised she would make sure that Lori did. And the officer said after this conversation, he did not feel the need to take her there. So that sums up that meeting, which is on the YouTube page, on the Pretty Lies YouTube page. You may have to go back a bit, but we do have that full interview there for you to watch yourself. And appreciate you guys so much. I'll be back tomorrow. There's some other news that I may jump into. We may continue this. Just depends on how much I can fit into one episode for these smaller little news bits like we talked at the beginning of the episode. But again, guys, thank you so much for your understanding, your support, and stick with us. We're just getting started on this series. We've got some good trials coming up. So really appreciate all you guys. Thanks.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.